Sitaram, once again welcome to SWA on Sankhya TV, carried exclusively on the responsible station Sankhya TV. SWA whereby we deal with the principles by which we should live. Of course, these principles find their root in spirituality, and so it is from this angle we move forward to program 8. The last program we had spoken about how one continues to maximize their prayer, their daily prayer, by the use of chosen color flowers. A Hindu, today we will deal with Trikaal Sandhyaa. A Hindu is taught to touch base with God 3 times a day, Trikaal Sandhyaa. Looking at the very word Sandhyaa, most time when we hear the word Sandhyaa, we think of evening prayer. It is so. But according to gender, Striling, when Sandhyaa is in the feminine gender, it refers to evening prayer. When it's pulling or masculine gender, it refers to prayer at any time. So when we use the term Trikaal Sandhyaa, or when the Hindu uses the term Trikaal Sandhyaa, it means prayer or touching base with God at least 3 times per day. But before we talk about touching base with Bhagwan, God, 3 times a day, we have to have an idea of the 3 Gunas, which we will proceed to explain. Now, when one says touching base with God, it's not blindly the worship of God. It's touching base with God, representing that which is divine, representing by extension how that tributary of spirituality can creep in our lives and don't leave us for any great portion of the day. And that's the whole idea of Trikaal Sandhyaa. We get into a little more detail. Before we speak about touching base with God, we have to understand the 3 forces of nature, which are called the 3 Gunas. Now, this word Guna carries, it's many faceted in meaning, but the 2 major meanings when Guna is used, it's to refer to the 3 forces of nature, but also the 6 Gunas are the 6 noble characteristics or characteristic traits each person should aspire to have as part of their life. But we are talking Gun in the context of the 3 forces of nature. They are known as Satgun, Rajaguna, and Tamoguna. We go further. We talk about Satgun. Now, each of these Gunas, being 3 Gunas, they are equally distributed throughout the day. So each one will prevail for 8 hours of the day. The wise have said that Satgun prevails between 4 a.m. and 8 a.m., 4 hours, and then the next 4 hours is between 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. This is the point in time when Satgun, that force of nature that is always there, whether we're short, thin, white, black, whatever ethnicity, these are forces of nature. Just like Newton and Einstein created laws of nature, they influence every human being. But Satgun has positive influences. In that, this is the time there are thoughts on the divine. So we arise in the morning, somewhere between there, hopefully. And you know, somewhere along the line, the mind runs on the Supreme, that God of our likeness and understanding. And then we might do something about it. So we get up, we perform our morning ablutions, and we offer prayer to God, offer a flower to God, as the case may be, all Satgun. Then, it's also a time when we get up with positive thoughts, you know. So after bringing, hopefully, God into mind, we think about the good things that we want to do for the day, where we want to be an instrument to help others in distress. We want to embark or help some worthy cause. All positive thoughts happens. There's also an intention to do good. And it may be to help others in distress or just simply to do something good, something innovative. And these are some of the thought processes that go through at Satgun. We now move to Rajaguna. So Rajaguna, it's said it occurs between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. as we quickly realize that that's the time when we are in work, or if it's a student, that's the time we're in school. what really goes on there? There are not much thoughts on the divine, because the focus is schoolwork, the focus might be taking care of the responsibilities in our job, in that environment. And it's really boiled down to a fair day's work for a fair day's pay. We're trying to work honest and hard to get the necessary reward. In the case of a student, the attention is more focused on academic endeavors and other areas of learning, extracurricular activities, and so forth. So in Rajaguna, it's really about our sustenance. It doesn't necessarily we don't have the time much to spend on God. We should, but the reality of it is that we are more absorbed in these undertakings. Fair enough, fair enough. And then we move now to the third force of nature known as Tamoguna, occurring usually between 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. That's the time when the divine is virtually out of the picture. When we get into all sorts of negative practices, vices, substance abuse, immoral acts, lassitude, overeating, etc. All the negatives creep in or come to the fore, usually at this time. So these are three forces of nature which we have to be aware of. And they don't control us, but if not aggressively understood and aggressive steps are not taken, put into place, then they become, those forces overpower us. So understanding the times we have to be wary of and the times that we have to be, we should embrace, it's an important facet of handling the three forces of nature. Now, Trikaal Sandhyaa ought to be aligned. Prayer ought to be aligned with the forces of nature, working in sync with the forces of nature, harnessing the forces of nature. So, morning and evening prayer is done in Subguna, because ideally the morning prayer should end somewhere at 8 a.m. The spiritually enlightened usually awake at 4 a.m. Brahmurt to begin preparations or start their prayer. And evening prayer, as we all know, we do at sunset, roughly around sunset. So those times, those prayers encompass the Subguna, 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. All well and good. The lunchtime prayer, when we are caught between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m., most times we in a work environment, we in a school environment. So what accommodation there now is for God? We ought to provide the accommodation. Although the focus might be in work or schoolwork, we ought to make provision for God, and it's an easy, deft move. Short mantra, Om Shri Rudribhyo Namaha. And this is a prayer to the Rudras, the 11 Rudras of Bhagwan Shiva. They prevail at lunchtime. They don't only prevail in the prayer room. If our lifestyle is up to mark, the diet is up to mark, and the mannerisms coupled with diet, they are up to mark too. In other words, we can't be nice and soft in prayer and aggressive and coarse and saucy in our speech. It doesn't go in sync. So the mannerisms have to accompany what we eat and what we drink. And when those things are shaped, then this is the temple. Then this is the temple that the Rudras will prevail. So when it comes to lunchtime, so we sit, and in a very subtle, easy move, we just chant that mantra, whether in our mind or softly. And what we have done, we have offered that food, which is now converted to prasad, to the 11 Rudras of Bhagwan Shiva, because they are present at lunchtime. There are general prayers that we use for meals that could also go into place, but we are concentrating on here how one can make subtle moves as a Hindu and still fulfill the desired goal of communicating God 3 times a day. We had given, just as a quick reminder, in the morning, as far as meals are concerned, the 8 Vasus prevail. So that was given earlier, Om Shri Vasubhyo Namaha. And at evening time, the 12 Adityas, the 12 projections of Bhagwan Shiva, Om Shri Sarva Aditya Devtabhyo Namaha, they prevail at dinner time. So a prayer could also be chanted for these deities on those occasions. So we can align the 3 times we touch God with the 3 gunas. We look further and we see that Tamogun is left out of the picture. That after 8 p.m. we don't want to encourage prayer at that time, but that too has its place and purpose. But suffice it to say, in the beginning, this is where we're looking to structure the prayer. Now we pay some attention to the evening prayer. Evening prayer is best done in Go Dhuli. What is Go Dhuli? Go refers to cow, Dhuli is the dust. The dust raised by the cows when they return from the pastures to the barn at the hour of sunset. This is the time, it's 24 minutes in span, which pleases Bhagwan Krishna, as we said, who is known as Gopal. Among other interpretations, Gopal meaning the protector of the cows. And Bhagwan Krishna is ecstatic, he's comforted when the cows return from the pastures during that 24-minute period. It is known as Godholi, when clouds of dust emanate from the earth as the cattle tread their way towards their barn, towards their shelter. Godholi, being 24 minutes, 12 of those, the first 12 of those minutes, prudent Jyotisis try to avoid. In other words, there's 12 minutes before sunset and there's 12 minutes after sunset. The 12 minutes before sunset, Jyotisis try to avoid. Reason being that we learn from basic fundamental Jyotish, from fundamental astrology, that the last 10th, what we call a dasams of a day, ought to be abandoned if for any major undertaking, for any decision that has major consequences. It could be business, it could be otherwise, it could be a family dispute that we huddle everybody together to make pronouncements and to give direction and to appease sides. That's a major decision. That's a major undertaking. It's a family at stake here. We avoid convening that in the last 10th of a day. Simple, just watch sunrise, watch sunset, divide by 1/10 of that, minus it from sunset. And the maths is there. One may refer to the SVV website where we have done an example of such a calculation. The SVV is always open to receiving little queries or clarifications. The numbers contact numbers are up on the website or one can email. So the 12 minutes before sunset, for that reason, the Psalms is abandoned. So the ideal 12 minutes is 12 minutes following sunset. Sunset is not 6 p.m. every day. These days it's about 6:26 p.m. So it varies. One can access sunset from, one can Google it up, one can get it on the daily newspapers, one can have a diary from any year. And the sunset and sunrise, very little difference, 1 minute sometimes. Suffice it to say for the time being, that it's easy to get the sunset, and we just look for 12 minutes after the sunset. So a day like today, 6:26 to 6:38 p.m. is the ideal 12 minutes to begin evening prayer. Now, it's the best time, of course, prayer, the major part of that prayer is the lighting of diya. And there's a nice practice that could be incorporated by families here. Not every day, each and every one of us will be available at Godhuli, at that hour of sunset to light diya. Some may be caught in traffic, some may have a meeting at work, the children might have lessons, but somebody may be home around that time. So, farm it out. Today, whoever is available will light diya, and then we rotate it. And what eventually happens by that nice subtle practice is that the entire family is a praying family. Everybody takes charge of lighting diya, have a turn in lighting diya. And the days when more than one family member is present, get together. If all there, get together and light diya. That is a highly potent practice for evening prayer. 1/3 of the ideal prayer per day is very potent when this is implemented, Godhuli. There are little calculations that need to be mentioned at this point in time. for clarification purposes. There are 2 days in every week, every Saturday and Sunday, that could be a little catch. Saturday is easier to deal with because Saturday ideal time is shortly after 24 minutes after sunset. So if sunset is 6:30, then at 6:54 p.m., 24 minutes after sunset, right after that, it's the time to light diya. There's a special calculation why. We wouldn't burden you with that. We reference the Jyotish Shastras with that, but that's one thing to remember. So as across the board, 24 minutes, shortly after 24 minutes after sunset, one lights diya on a Saturday. Now, many people who have Sinistra Graha or Rahu Graha are told that on a Saturday it is good to do Hanuman Aradhana, to puja Hanuman Baba. So sometimes we are told, well, light a diya with black till in front of a Hanuman Murti or picture and have a run of the Hanuman Chalisa. That is all well good, but this is the time to do it. Shortly after 24 minutes on a Saturday, that's the ideal time. Now we come to Sunday. Sunday is a little more technical. As we have discussed in Satsang, each day the Graha known as Rahu has an hour and a half input, negative impact on input every day. So this is Thursday. And on a Thursday from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. roughly, we'll come back to that. One ought to avoid embarking on anything new. So we have something to do during the course of the day. It may carry us, we may have to start in the evening, either start it before 1:30 or start it after 3. A teacher has to teach a new concept, and the time falls within that time. Of course, you teach classes many days. Introduce the concept at the previous day or subsequent day, and then if your class period is inside Rahu Kala, that's unavoidable, that's no problem. Introduce the concept at a different time. So it's easy to manage. These things are not difficult. It's not rocket science. We can manage our undertakings, but it spells for fruition. If we sidestep the Rahu Kal, it spells for fruition. So we come to Sunday now. Let the point be made that we are assuming sunrise is 6 o'clock. When I say Rahu Kal on a Thursday is from 1:30 to 3. Again, if sunrise is 6:10, then the Rahu Kal on a Thursday is 1:40 to 3:10. So, and if it's before 6 o'clock, as is sometimes the case, let's say it's 4:45 sunrise, then on a Thursday, quarter past 1 to 2:45 is Rahu Kal. Again, SVV is always privy and open to clarification. We have examples up on the website, SVVTT.com. But Sunday now, Rahu Kal, providing sunset is 6 o'clock, it's from 4:30 to 6. Sometimes the sunset may be before 6, let's say 10 to 6. So the 12 minutes following sunset, 5:50 to 6:02, that's the ideal time to light diya. But we have to forego Rahu Kal. So on that day, only 2 minutes remain. From 6 to 6:02 p.m. will be the ideal time to light diya. And if, on the other hand, the converse happens in that sunset finishes a long time and Rahu Kal extends itself way beyond, we have to wait till Rahu Kal finishes, and then shortly after, the 12 minutes after sunset would have gone, but Rahu Kal prevails, and shortly after that Rahu Kal, we light diya. So Saturdays and Sundays are 2 days to pay attention to when we light the diya. The Saturday, as you say, is not difficult, but the Sunday, we can access that from the SVVTT website. Go to the daily calendar. Any Sunday, you will see on the right-hand column, the extreme right column, times to avoid, and you'll see somewhere around 6 o'clock, the time is put there in red. Avoid up to so-and-so. Right after that, the day is written on Sunday. So we have worked it out for you. Okay? But it lends potency to lighting diya, bottom line, 12 minutes after sunset, making provisions for Saturday and for Sunday. So just a quick idea or revision of the Sunday situation. If Rahu Kal finishes before sunset, we still have to wait for sunset to finish, and then 12 minutes after sunset we light the diya. If, as we just said, if the Rahu Kal finishes after sunset, the 12 minutes after sunset may have gone, but we light the diya. We just need to keep that in mind. It sounds harder than it really is. And as we say, bottom line, we have worked it out for everyone. We come now to Chote and Chaturdashi pujas. Now, these are based on lunar calculations, and they may fall out of Subguna and Rajaguna. So we might find that as in a previous program, we had the calendar up and we showed that the Chote went into the night, Chaturdashi went into the night, way beyond way into the Tamoguna. The reason these are dictates. The Chote and the Chaturdashi are dictates of the lunar movement, and sometimes they transcend the Gunas. And at the end of the day, one doesn't have to be too bothered here, because it has been worked out here, and the website has been put up for one to come to terms with. Thus far, and most times, we are routinely involved in Ganesh Chote Puja and Shiv Baba Chaturdashi Puja. And basically, they are to help us hurdle the challenges and the negatives that we face based on the laws of karma, based on the ways of the world, from day to day, from month to month. But when we are involved in groups that perform Chote and Chaturdashi Puja, because most times it is temples that undertake these observations and these rites, there is also the more positive forms of worship like Satyanarayan Swami Puja, which is more progressive, which sees about the fortification of the individual and not necessarily having to channel everything in dealing with challenges. So that's what we mean by the word positive, for the individual, not considering the devatas. What about if there is a death in the family, God forbid, there's a passing of someone, and a core member cannot be present or is not part of the undertaking of the Chote and Chaturdashi Puja. And this translates itself even in a home where puja is being done. The only forbidden act, and we quote Pret Manjari, we quote Dharam Sindhu, those are the two major authoritative texts on death ceremonies. Only those people in the home who are performing the Mritakaram, the rites for the person who was passed on, which is observing the fast until Daskatra, until the shaving ceremony. Only those are not permitted to participate in such pujas if they are attached to a temple or if the home routinely does that. Reason being, it is known as ashud. Ashud not meaning impure in that sense. Reason being, remember, the period of Dasgat is a period of redress for those who have passed on. So the performer of the rite has to be totally focused on making sure he or she is within that perimeter of focus to give redress to whatever shortcomings, whatever that person who has passed on could not have done, could not have completed. So it is for that reason, in that context, they are told, well, look, sidestep, because your focus for that point in time is elsewhere. Other members of the household who might be part of a temple group and so forth, you're quite in the clear to continue participating. But whether it is Chote, Chaturdashi, Satyanarayan Katha, whatever puja, so there's no ambiguity there. It was quite clear, and those are two well-established practices, especially across the country, and they are good practices, as I say. The less energy we expend on the negatives and the challenges that sap our energy, the more reserve we have to continue and not succumb to the battles of life. So there are two good practices to be part of. And finally, we come to rising above the Tribunal. So we have talked about Sadgun, Rajgun, Tamogun, and it seemed that everything should be Sadgun. Well, this is Shri Ramchandra in Aranyakand in Ramayana, speaking to the world through the medium of Lakshman, And what did the Lord says? Kahiyata so param viragi. He says, my brother, the supremely dispassionate person in life, Trinasamasidhi Tina Gunatyagi, is that person who regards the three gunas as a mere blade of grass that can toss it into the air and not be too concerned. Meaning that we have to transcend the three gunas. These three forces of nature we have to be aware of, but we have to transcend it. So that even in Tamogun, when we say it is a bed, a hotbed for vices and sinful acts and so forth, even in that period of the day, God should pervade the thought process, especially when it comes to major undertakings or major decisions, or when the mind tends to be attached and absorbed in unwanted thoughts. That is the time when we should replace with divine and spiritual thoughts. When we reach that stage, then we have regarded the three gunas as a mere blade of grass. Then whether it is Sadgun, 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., whether it is Rajagun, in a busy work environment, this busy school environment, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., or whether it is in Tamogun, 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., regardless of the time, that divine spark is fully kindled in us, so that whatever undertakings of the day come to the fore, the decision or the reaction is influenced because we are heavily rooted in spirituality. A param viragi, one who has transcended the three gunas, because there are different pathways to God. Vairagya is dispassion, that's one way, so we get a way to master that part of going to God. Gyan is yet another proclaimed part, spiritual wisdom, being wise in the ways of God, and seeing how that translates or how it ought to translate in our daily life. And of course, those are pathways, but the highway to God is bhakti, which is unconditional love for God without an agenda, without necessarily a selfish motive. That is the highway to God, bhakti. It is known as Shri Ram Chandra has indicated here that this is the pathway to Param Viragi, to master that pathway. And it brings us, as we conclude, to the point that when we had spoken before about performing Ganesh Chaut Puja, performing Chaturdashi Puja, even if it were Tamogun, this has to be appreciated by the individual, that puja in any, or prayer to God in any of the gunas should supersede any force of nature, should have us totally focused, totally absorbed in making contact with the divine, rising above those forces. Once again, as we bring this program to a conclusion, we join you next Thursday as usual at 6:30 p.m. when we'll be continuing our discussions on Swadharma, as we say, the principles by which we should all live, by which we should all abide, so that we could contribute positively to society and by extension the nation. Coming to you only exclusively on the reliable, responsible Sankhya TV. Sitaram.